Vikes now, Dustin Baker, the May 5th edition. This is my father's birthday and my uncle's birthday. So get this, my dad and my uncle, brothers, were born May 5th, 1962 and May 5th, 1963. It's the Irish side of the family, Irish twins indeed. I don't know why that's relevant to the Vikings, but I thought I'd share it. So today I'm going to deliver 4 notable free agents that are available for the Vikings. And these aren't like rumored tips that they're on the way. They're 4 men who make sense in light of the current depth chart post-draft. So I'm going to jump right into them. We'll talk for about 10 to 15 minutes. 4 dudes, various positions. And I want to preface all of this by stating that the 2022 Vikings, with Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Kevin O'Connell in the saddle, through their roster moves and particularly their recommitment to Kirk Cousins, they are telling you through their actions that they are in it to win it this year. Kwesi calls it a competitive rebuild. Well, the competitive part is assigned as an adjective for a reason. They think they can be good. That's why they kept Cousins. That's why they restructured veteran contracts like Harrison Smith and Adam Thielen. So for the seventh year in a row, the Vikings are all in. Some of you are dismayed because you wanted to rebuild. Well, you're not quite getting that. You're going to have to see how this season goes, and if it goes shitty, perhaps they will do that and get the next big thing at quarterback in 2023, which we will salivate over and address on this show. But they're not doing that yet. They are running it back, so to speak. There's a lot of changes. I talked about that 2 weeks ago on an episode, a lot of departures. And with this draft, they're showing they're getting better defensively. So the lens in which you need to examine this show and the Vikings this summer is that they want to contend. So I came up with these 4 players with that mindset. And some of them, you're going to say, they're not going to do that. Well, I'm going to explain why it could reasonably add up. The first is Hicks. He was rumored to be a part of the Vikings free agent class before free agency even started. And that's because he has ties to Ed Donatel. Ed Donatel was a defensive backs coach with the Bears from 2015 to 2018, a very Fangian employment. And that's when Hicks was starting his damage and honing his craft, devastating the Vikings. You know the drill. Every time the Vikings go up against Hicks, it's a horror film, a shit show, at least from a purple standpoint. So there is that connection there. And those ties in sports matter. Coaches like their guys. If they cross paths and that guy was a badass, they're probably going to go find him again. So here's the deal on Hicks. You might think, well, they already got Dalvin Tomlinson, Armin Watts, Harrison Phillips. Don't need them. True. But if you want to win a Super Bowl, 61 years this team right here hasn't done it. And if you want to get to February meaningful football, you got to be deep. You got to have dudes that can get you there. So while Armin Watts, Dalvin Tomlinson, Harrison Phillips might do the trick, Hicks is a dude that can not guarantee it, but can certainly make the defensive line better. He'd probably be the Armin Watts, and I'm here to report Hicks is better than Armin Watts. Watts might end up being just fine this year without Hicks. We shall see. But we know verifiably, because you watch 2 games per year with these Bears versus the Vikings, that Hicks is better. So there is that tie to Ed Donatel, this defensive emphasis that we've seen, especially in the draft. 3 out of the first 4 picks in the NFL draft for the Vikings were defenders. Lewis Seen, Andrew Booth Jr., and Brian Asamoah from Oklahoma. So they realized that we need to be balanced. It would have been tantalizing as hell for the new offense first coach to walk in and say, give me more offensive playmakers in this draft, homie. He didn't do that. Kwesi said, we're going to get better on defense. We are going to be a balanced organization that happens to have an offense first head coach. So they can carry this philosophy over to the last part of free agency, the next wave, so to speak, and say, yeah, let's go get Hicks, who has ties to the guy that works here as the defensive head coach, and let's get strong as shit in the up front in the defensive line. Now, mind you, the Vikings have about $12 million in cap space. About 7 to 9 million of that will be needed to sign all these undrafted free agents, the draft class, fill out the practice squad. So to make any of these moves happen, I should have said this 4 minutes ago, you're going to need to probably restructure the contracts of Dalvin Cook and Eric Kendricks, just like they did Harrison Smith and Adam Thielen. They've shown a propensity to do it, So why not do it again to get stronger for the 2022 season? So I've told you guys before, I'm not cool enough to have a producer or graphics department that streams these on the bottom of the show, but number one would be Akeem Hicks, at least in the order that I'm delivering them. Not necessarily priority, but yeah, so you should see Akeem Hicks somewhere on the screen, but not cool enough to have that on there. So defense there. Offense. This is the one where you're going to roll your eyes. Odell Beckham Jr. is a free agent. He tore his ACL, regrettably, in the Super Bowl. Still got a ring. He was making an impact on that game. But, just crazy Murphy's Law luck that he would do that against the Bengals. He probably won't be healthy until midseason. But I'm telling you, there is a reasonable chance the Vikings could be interested in him and vice versa. Now, if you're going, oh, they're not going to do that, the Vikings would never do that, you're using your Zimmer and Spielman brain to think about how operations go. I agree. If Spielman and Zimmer were still in charge, then Odell Beckham probably wouldn't be on the table. Because why? They care about defense. They happen to build a pretty good offensive roster, but Zimmer particularly is a defensive brain. Conversely, you have new guys in charge. One of them is Kevin O'Connell, who, by the way, was a coworker of Odell Beckham for 3 months in Los Angeles when they, bada bing, won a Super Bowl. So there is that tie there. If this guy, OBJ, remains a free agent, his pal, LSU guy, Justin Jefferson, also plays on this purple and yellow team. And therefore, while this guy, Odell, recovers, gets ready for the 2022 season, he could do it with the Vikings. It adds up, and then he could be ready by October or November, and just like the Hicks move, you would get better. KJ Osborne, you can liken him to Armon Watts. He's probably going to be a pretty damn good WR3. Well, here to report, once again, Odell Beckham's better. So you shouldn't have the mindset of we good with the current pieces, especially if this team is truly contending for a Super Bowl. So Odell Beckham, he brings the jersey sales, he brings the pizzazz, the sizzle, and he has pre-existing ties to the Vikings head coach. They're not really rooted in a lot, but they are 3 months worth on a Super Bowl winning team. So if you want to get better at wide receiver, you got Jarvis Landry, Julio Jones, Will Fuller, and Odell Beckham. I picked Beckham because the relationship, presumably, with Kevin O'Connell. So get rid of your Zimmer and Spielman brain thinking, oh, they would never do that, because you don't know. Did you think they were going to trade with the Packers and Lions last week? Nope. But they did it, and they said to hell with yous. We don't care about your stereotypes or your pre-existing notions about trading with divisional foes. They did it anyway because they thought they could get better, for better or worse. We'll see how those transactions pan out. So get rid of the Spielman-Zimmer way of thinking, because this is a brand new era where anything could conceivably happen, especially happen with ties to these dudes like Hicks and Beckham. The next one is self-evident, talked about it on this show, written about it, it's all over the digital stratosphere, is J.C. Tretter. I do not know if he's healthy. I've seen rumors or speculation or theories that he's not, only practice once in a while with the Browns. That could explain why he hasn't signed anywhere yet. However, he's not old, not crazy old, and he could realistically play again, and he is one of the best pass-blocking centers in the world. The Vikings employ one of the worst pass-blocking centers in the world, at least for a guy who always starts. He just so happens to be on his 5th year of his rookie deal, which was declined. 4th year of his deal, 5th year was declined. He ain't coming back unless he has a complete revolution, a personal revolution with a new coaching staff. Tretter would put Bradbury on the back burner. Tretter is that damn good at his craft. I don't know how expensive he'll be. Each day that passes, he's probably more affordable. So if he's healthy, the Vikings' offensive line, my goodness, could be fixed with a healthy version of Tretter, because you would have Darisaw, Cleveland, Tretter, probably Ingram, whether you like him or you don't, and Brian O'Neill. Wow, that's an offensive line that actually isn't just average, it sounds good. And that should be the goal. I know for 4 years, I have said, you have said, let's just be decent on the offensive line. Give me a right guard who doesn't get bowled over. Give me somebody that's competent. Well, all of these guys that they're assembling, especially if they get Tretter, that would be an offensive line that's good. That would rank in the top 12 of the NFL rather than our utopian vision of 17th best. We'll take it, baby. We're just sick of bottom 4 bullshit where Cousins is under siege all the time. because he's a pocket passer, and he's not, one of his weaknesses is he's not crazy good with improvising. So it makes all the sense in the world that these new leadership faces would say, let's protect the pocket passer. J.C. Tretter would do that. Finally, this one isn't scintillating or sizzling. I wrote about all of these all the way on Vikings, by the way, on VikingsTerritory.com. So if you already read that article, I'm doubling up on you, but you can read it in print there. The final one is Eric Ebron. And he is not a big name, like, your grandpa doesn't know who that is unless he's a Lions fan or Steelers or Colts fan. But he was the 10th overall pick in the 2014 NFL draft, so NFL fans know who he is. In 2018, the guy scored 13 touchdowns for the Colts. Fantasy football players, which you probably are, remember that. He was a gem for one season. He's always, besides that year, underperformed his draft prognosis. But the Vikings usually go into a season with 2 tight ends that are worth a damn. Right now we have one who we think every single year is going to break out into stardom, and his name's Irv Smith Jr. But he's recovering from a torn meniscus. And if something happens to him, you're staring down the face of a Johnny Munt, Ben Ellefson, Zach Davidson, and Nick Muse sandwich. I don't know how that would taste. I really don't. I would love to believe these things about Johnny Munt, that, he is capable of being a TE1 or TE2. I'm going to guess if they signed him with purpose, then he's going to be decent. But we're putting a lot of stock and stake in Irv Smith staying healthy, because normally we'd have Kyle Rudolph or Tyler Conklin to fall back onto. They don't work here anymore. You'd fall back onto Munt. I think that Ebron is a realistic signing. I didn't quite dangle Rob Gronkowski because, he's just going to go to the Bucs or the Bills or some shit like that. But there are tight ends out there. Rudolph's even out there. I didn't bring him back on this show because I think that would be a Zimmer Spielman thing to do, like we talked about a few minutes ago. And then who else is out there? Blake Jarwin. But I really think that there might be an emphasis on TE2 because there's really not one right now. And if something happens to Irv Smith, just like it did after the preseason Chiefs game last year, it's panic time. It's trade for Chris Herndon time. And you know what that feels like. 4 dudes. Akeem Hicks. That'd put butts in seats. OBJ was sure as shit do the same thing. J.C. Tretter would be fruition after we've dreamt about it for almost 2 months. And then Ebron would be a bet hedger for Irv Smith as a TE2 who could fill in as TE1 as needed. Those are the free agents to keep an eye on because what they have, whether you like it or you don't, I laid out a case for it, is realism. I didn't go out and say Julio Jones, just pull that out of nowhere. But Odell Beckham has those ties, and I know that's the one that you'll think that I'm nuts on, but it's really not that outrageous. All of these ideas in the grand scheme of things are unlikelihoods because there's 32 teams in the NFL, and that means the Vikings have about a 3% chance of signing each one of them. But these are things to be thinking about because as the summer goes on or spring goes on into the summer, there is a chance to explore this free agent market for additional talent to get better. Don't be content with what you got if you can get better. That should be a Super Bowl mantra. That's all I got for Wednesday, May 5th. I will be back tomorrow. Skol, baby.